Ksenia, and today we're going to be having a look at the chart of Amelia Earhart. Now, for those who don't know, she was an early day aviationist and a feminist. She was a writer, she was a book author, she was a nurse, highly intelligent woman and public speaker, and something of a show woman as well. She did like the limelight, and she certainly played up to it well. And because we're in Leo season at the moment, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to look at the chart of somebody who is an out-and-out Leo. You know, she's born on the 24th of July, making her just into the Leo season, on the cusp of Cancer and Leo. But she also has a very mysterious life, or mysterious death rather. She died in very tragic circumstances, and a lot of the truth of her passing has not yet been revealed. The wreckage of her plane has never been found. She died circumnavigating the world, trying to be the first woman to solo circumnavigate the world. So we don't know where she went down, and the plane's never been found. It's possible that she may have been prisoner by some country in the Pacific somewhere, or she may have died and crashed into the ocean. Nobody really knows for sure. There are many stories that are out there about the possibilities, and certain indicators and photographs have been found, and DNA for this particular body that's been found, but there is no absolute proof yet. So she's a very intriguing. Her death is very intriguing, but she's also a very intriguing person through her life. Her parents divorced. She was born in 1897, and her parents, her father was an alcoholic, her parents divorced, and she was in and out of school due to affordability issues, and her mother not being able to pay the fees for her to finish college. And yet she was very intelligent, very well read. She married a book publisher, somebody who helped her with her promotional career as well. And so she wrote a lot, she toured a lot, she spoke a lot, and became a real icon before her death at 40 years of age. So I thought this would be a fabulous chart to explore, because it's Leo season and Amelia Earhart is a Leo sun. But not only that, I think, it's really in this day and age when women are becoming more empowered, it's really important to honor and uphold those that have gone before us for their wisdom, their contribution, and the shining light that they brought to the world. So without further ado, let's take a look at the fabulous life of Amelia Earhart. So here's the chart of Amelia Earhart. Now, born on the 24th of July, 1897 at 11:30 p.m. in Atchison in Kansas, USA. Now, the first thing we look at, or generally when I do a chart reading, I would look at the Primal Triad, which is the sun, the moon, and the Ascendant, and what they mean, because the sun represents where we shine, how we shine. It's the least important of the Primal Triad. The next thing we want to look at is the emotions, what we need to feel emotionally fulfilled and emotionally happy. And we see that via the moon, and the moon's placement in the house that it's in and the sign that it's in, etc. And finally, the most important point in anybody's chart is the Ascendant, and we know this from having an accurate birth time. When we don't have an accurate birth time, we don't know the Ascendant degree, and that makes a great deal of difference, especially if you're doing forecasts for the future. If you don't actually have an accurate birth time, then the forecast's going to be way off, because especially in my astrology practice, I utilize progressions, and progressions are very time sensitive, and your transits and house placements and stuff can also be a little bit skewed if we have a bad if we have a birth time that's not accurate. But Amelia's birth time is 11:30 p.m. in the evening, which makes her ascendant degree 3 degrees, the degree of Gemini, in Taurus. So there's a big emphasis on Gemini in her chart, as you can see. She has four planets in the sign of Gemini as the second house, and her ascendant is at the degree of Gemini. And what does Gemini represent? Being where the action is, being part of something exciting, something new, something innovative. It's also very intelligent. It's very communicative. And she was all that. She was a public figure. Amelia was a writer, very Gemini to be a writer, and a public speaker. So writing, speaking, communicating, all these things are Gemini things. So at a very basic level, she was a very Gemini type person. But we can also see from her sun placement that she was Leo. Obviously, there's the sun down at 2 degrees of Leo, and it's there with Mercury as well. And when you've got those two together, they're 10 degrees apart, so close enough to be, you know, a fairly loose conjunction. When you have both of these together, well, you can expect that you're going to be a very vivacious communicator. The sun is where you shine, and Mercury is your communication. The sun is self-confidence, and Mercury is how you think. And it's all happening in the sign of Leo. Leo is very flamboyant. It's very, here I am, very visual, very autonomous, actually. You know, it's not about the collective and the group as a whole. It's about, look at me as an individual and what I can bring to the world. And so this is actually beautiful placement to have the sun. And Mercury is similarly in good dignity in Leo. So this is great. This means that it's only got good aspects coming to both those planets, so that her communication style, her flamboyance, her visual nature of being someone exceptional, somebody famous, somebody to be taken note of, it's going to be very strong, and was very strong in her life. She rose to prominence quite early with her flying capabilities, and then, as we all know, became a social identity because of that. But Leo happens to be her 4th house in whole sign astrology. So there's definitely a connection to home. And for Amelia, she was known throughout the world, but nowhere was she more heralded, more upheld as an iconic figure than in her home country of the United States of America. But, these days, she's recognised worldwide as being a real mover and a shaker for the feminist movement and women's empowerment. But, yes, certainly during her lifetime, she was lauded in America more so than anywhere else. So the sun for her is, as I said, in the 4th house. Now, when we have the sun in the 4th house, it's actually at the lowest point in the sky, as seen by the fact she was born almost at midnight. The sun was right underneath the earth, so not very visible. And when we're born with this position, it means that obviously we're born at midnight, but that we can be actually a more private person, a person of contemplation and deep emotions. So yes, she actually did have this flamboyant public side, but so much of her inner mental workings, her emotional way of being, her sense of identity was connected to her inner self. So how this played out in Amelia's life was that she was quite, she spent hours as a child reading and just on her own, reading books and learning, and was quite happy in her own company, comfortable in her own company. So doing something like circumnavigating the globe on her own would have been a no-brainer for her, because she didn't necessarily have to be surrounded by people all the time. She could be on her own, and she was quite comfortable with that, being a more private person, having time alone. So the 4th house also rules land and home, and there's a strong sense of identity with the homeland. That can either be with the town you're born in or the family you're born in, but at a bigger scale, the country you're born in. And we talked a little about that a moment ago. But she was, with the sun here, you're going to feel happy and at peace. You're going to feel like you shine most in your own home environment. And you might also have strong leadings towards hospitality or caring professions, because the 4th house is connected to Cancer ideas and Cancer themes, which is that nurturing, that caring. And she actually was a nurse for a period of time. And that was during the First World War, and she got involved in taking care of returned soldiers and working in hospitals, etc. So self-esteem with this placement can also be tied to property ownership, and you can really come into your own through the development of land and home, and combined with that, offering support and guidance to others in their own personal evolution. This is that caring, nurturing thing. And of course, this played out in a very powerful way in Amelia's life, because she was offering support and guidance to others, which, in some terminologies we would call nurturing. That's offering support and guidance to others. But she did it in a very Leonian style way, very Leo way, where she was a public speaker, up the front. Let me inspire you, let me teach you, let me guide you, let me share from my own experience to help you with your personal evolution. So she was doing the rounds as a public speaker after she became famous. And this is a very, the flamboyant, visible Leo way of offering guidance and offering nurture and care, which is fourth house type themes to other people. So it's also possible that careers, because Sun is connected to careers can manifest from our home space, from where we reside. Now, Amelia moved from Kansas to more prominent cities in her later life, and she was able to build her career from those places. But it was certainly not a everyday go to work in a machining factory or, office job or anything like that. She was doing her own thing, her way, which is a very Leonian way of doing career. Very independent, very autonomous, making her own road through life. And indeed, the Sun in her chart is trined by Uranus and Saturn. Uranus is very individual. Saturn is structure. And so there was this easy, harmonious trine happening between her career in Leo, that this is where I shine, this is my self-confidence, I'm autonomous, I am somebody in my own right, and this the trine from Uranus, which happens to rule air flight, aeroplanes, and Saturn, which is offering some structure. So she was able to fly airplanes, what have you, trining her Sun for a career, and there was some structure around that was brought to her life by touring, speaking, writing books. So there was some structure to how she actually manifested her career. So the Sun is the first thing I wanted to look at. It's really interesting, and it's very powerful in her chart because it's in good dignity and it's got good aspects. But what is really, really fascinating is this stellium that she has in Gemini, the second house. Now, this stellium consists of Pluto, the Moon, Venus, and Neptune. And we'll talk, this stellium is going to come into play quite a bit throughout this discussion. But the fact that Pluto is there with Venus and with the Moon. Now, Venus and the Moon are very feminine energies. One is the youthful feminine, the Venus, and one is the matriarchal feminine, the Moon. And Pluto is there in between the two of them. Pluto is the planet of transformation. Pluto is the planet of personal power and death and rebirth experiences. So we can interpret this in many ways. Like there are many ways to interpret this configuration. But when we look back in Amelia's life, we can see that Pluto was giving her power, a really empowered sense of womanhood and femininity, because she was a tremendous advocate for women's rights and the equality of women, and women being able to be recognized on an equal level with a man. And this was in 100 years ago from now, basically, sort of the early teens of the 19th century and 20th century and the 1920s. this era when women were not getting equally recognized. And so Pluto was really playing a very significant part with her moon and her Venus in pushing her forward, giving her some power, giving her, the ability to present to the world and change the world through this conjunction. And the focus on womanhood and the power of womanhood and the validity of womanhood. It's actually really fantastic. And it's also happening for her in second house Gemini. Gemini is, again, there's a connection to journeys with Gemini, traveling. There's a connection to intelligence, to public speaking, to writing, to communicating. And this is what she did around these empowerment issues. So it's really clear. And it's, when we've got a stellium in the chart, it's actually a really key part of our destiny. It's a really key part of who we are. And part of our creative mission in life. It's like a God-given destiny that we need to fulfill is the nature of a stellium, and that's basically 4 or more planets in one sign. You can have out of sign stelliums that happen within 30 degrees of one another. If you've got 4 planets within 30 degrees of each other. And that can happen across 2 signs. But she has a very strong Gemini stellium here. So intellect, communication, as I said, journeys, traveling. And of course, it's the second house, which is her house of resources for living. Whatever supports our bodily journey through life is seen from the second house. And so her ability to do public speaking, Gemini, around women's issues, around women's empowerment, the ability to be recognized as a figure in this movement that brought women more equality, all part of this empowerment that Pluto was bringing through her Venus and her moon. Now, Neptune's also part of this. Neptune is a bit slippery. Neptune's a bit intangible. Neptune is very ethereal and mysterious. And so there's this quality to her there. Like, she's an intriguing person. She was intelligent. She was very flamboyant. She was a very visible personality. But with Neptune, there comes sort of mask wearing as well, and mystery, so to speak. So we know that she was all these flamboyant things, but then we've also got the sun in the 4th house, house of home. There's a mystery about who she was in her private life, and how comfortable she was, how she shone within her home life. That's not really too well documented. And certainly mystery concerning her family life. Now, as I said, her parents were divorced when she was young, and she also had an alcoholic father. So Neptune's connected to addictions, and alcoholism obviously is one of those things. So Neptune is playing into this strong stellium throughout her life, offering Neptunian things, this sort of ability to put on a flamboyant mask to the public, but who she was in private's very sort of obscure, and also the ability to the connection with alcoholism was strong in her life because that was her father's experience. Now, it's known that when you have Neptune in the second house, you can have some self-esteem issues because Neptune dissolves things in the second house, represents value and self-esteem. So to feel worthy when you've got Neptune in the second house, you tend to give much more than you receive back. Sometimes this can affect your finances, but fortunately for Amelia, her partner was quite savvy, her marriage partner. But part of the lessons that she was here to learn were about valuing the self and self-love and self-actualization. And she certainly did master that. With Pluto there and the Moon and Venus, there was going to be an emphasis on empowering who she was, empowering that femininity this lifetime, and releasing that Neptune of repressed or dissolved, if you like, self-worth and value. So these would have been all issues that would have played out for Amelia, and certainly her first flight in a plane. Actually, it might have been her first publicity flight in a plane. She went as a passenger because she hadn't developed the confidence to fly on her own. But gradually, as her life went on, she thought, I want to do this myself. I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to embrace this. So, there was a gradual growth in self-confidence and a gradual growth in her own sense of worth, sense of value, sense of empowerment. So it's really, really interesting little stellium that she's got happening there. Anyhow, the next component of what I want to look at, and probably this is one of the most intriguing components to her chart, is the fact that she has the Lord of the 8th house, which is the house of death and rebirth, conjunct to the exact degree with the Lord of the 12th house of loss. Now, this is really one of the most fascinating parts of Amelia's chart. Jupiter and Mars. Jupiter rules her 8th house. Mars rules her 12th house. And they are connected together at 10 degrees of Virgo in the 5th house for her. So death and loss can be seen by this configuration where Mars and Jupiter are together. And how did she die? We assume it was in a violent way, Mars, and doing something she loved, which can be seen by the 5th house. The 5th house represents our passions, the things we love, the things that make us shine, that give us joy, give us pleasure. And she loved flying. She loved, when she learned how to do it and to fly herself, she set many records. But that's how she died, by flying, doing what she loved, following her passion and her hobby and her interest. And there is the Lord of death and rebirth with the Lord of loss, 12th house, together connected in that sign. So, in retrospect, like if I was doing a forward-looking reading and looking at this chart, I probably wouldn't interpret that configuration there as meaning death is going to come to you while you're in an airplane. I would be looking at more something like you might have very expansive, a very expansive dream life, because the 12th house Lord is with Jupiter, the Lord of expansion. That might be one way you would interpret that. Or you might say there's going to be some sort of mystery around, your hobbies. You're going to have hobbies that are mysterious, because the Lord of the 8th house of, hidden things, hidden mysteries, is in the house of hobbies and interests and pleasures. So, there are many ways to interpret these configurations, but in retrospect, we can look and see, my goodness, there is Mars, which represents violence, receiving only square aspects from other planets, together with Jupiter. This is the Lord of the 8th, Lord of the 12th, together in the house of hobbies and interests, which in this case, death and loss coming through her interest in aviation and flying. And as I said, there are only squares to this particular conjunction. Now this is just for those of you who don't know where I'm looking. We're down in the bottom right-hand quarter of her chart. There's a little Mars glyph, which is a circle with an arrow out the side, and then there's a Jupiter glyph, which is a cross with like a hook to the side. I hope that helps. Sorry if I've just confused you even more, but making a square aspect to these two planets is that conjunction, that stellium conjunction of 4 planets in Gemini. So we've got Pluto there. Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth. We've got Neptune there. Neptune, the planet of mysteries, of overseas, over oceans, over other countries, Neptune rules the oceans, so there's a real connection there. And the moon and Venus, that feminine empowerment that she represents. She was doing this amazing thing for women, being, attempting to be the first woman to circumnavigate the globe. And we can see that, that stellium is being impacted by and impacting Mars and Jupiter in the 5th house. So communications, Gemini, this is her self-valuing. This is her like, look at me, I am worthy, I am valuable, I'm proving myself here. Second house type things, sense of self-worth, and femininity, mystery, oceans, all these things we can see connecting with those two planets together representing death and loss. So I find this really, really intriguing to see this particular component of her chart playing out. Now I am imagining everyone's going to run out and check their own chart and make sure, gosh, have I got the Lord of my 8th house and the Lord of my 12th house together? What does that mean for me? Am I going to die in some horrific way? No, because everybody's chart is different, and we need to look at all the components of the chart, such as the stellium making a square. There's only square aspects. It's happening for her in the 5th house, and there's no supportive aspects from any other planets there. There's just so much more complexity than just looking at two little bits on their own. So I hope that helps a little. Now, the other thing there's a couple of last things I wanted to look at with her chart that tell us a lot about what a big person she was. Now, the first thing is that she has the North Node in the 10th house. This means that she was rising up in life into public recognition, into worldly achievements, and this is in the sign of Aquarius. Now, ordinarily we don't assess the sign placement of the North Node because the North Node's in a sign for 18 months at a time roughly, and therefore it's quite generational. It's not necessarily pertinent to anyone in particular, because everybody born in that 18-month period is going to have that same configuration, that the North Node in the same sign. However, the house placement, this is where an accurate birth time is very important, that the house placement of the North Node is very, very important. And here it is in the 10th house of worldly achievements. Interestingly enough, Aquarius is also tied to aviation and the air and flight. So it does have a bearing for her, but mainly it's regarding worldly achievements on a career level, on a very public, visible level in her life. Very, very powerful to have the North Node there. And when we've got the North Node, it's kind of, I say this a lot in my readings, it's like a toddler learning to walk. We're a bit unsure of ourselves there. It's unfamiliar. It's not territory we know very well from, say, past lives or early childhood. We're not familiar with this idea of being a public figure in her case. But it's like a toddler learning to walk. A toddler just is insatiable about trying to walk, and it will do so by pulling itself up, taking a few wobbly steps, falling down, pulling itself up on the couch again, taking a few wobbly steps, falling down, until eventually it learns to walk. And that's the nature of the North Node. And she would have had many attempts, and she did have many attempts at various careers, various opportunities for worldly achievement. And there was sort of a toddler learning to walk capacity to it. She tried to go to college. Mum didn't have enough money to pay for her to finish college, so she tried to do nursing. There was problems with that, and so on and so on. Her public life was filled with challenges, but she eventually rose to be a very iconic person with great worldly achievements. So that's how the North Node works for all of us, depending on where it is, but in her case, the 10th house. The other thing that's really, really interesting, and you won't see it looking at this chart, unfortunately, but there is a finger of God, or a yod, that runs from Saturn and Uranus to the MC, and then down to that stellium, down to the Moon, Pluto, Venus, around there. actually running to, sorry, my mistake, the finger of the yod is Neptune, because the MC is at 19 degrees, Saturn Uranus is at 25 and 24 degrees, and Neptune's at 21 degrees. So when we see a yod in a chart, it indicates a special destiny, a special mission in life, and particularly relating to the point of the needle, so to speak, which is Neptune for Amelia. Now, we would really only run a yod to an angle, such as the MC or the AC, DC or IC, and the planets. We wouldn't include, you know, the asteroids and things like that, or I don't in my readings, some people might, but that's how I would utilize a yod, or a finger of God, they're sometimes called, shape in the chart. Now, this indicates that part of Amelia's overall mission in life was something very Neptunian. And in this case, well, we know she was traveling overseas. There was mystery about her, and that mystery has lasted all these years. You know, we're talking 70 whatever years after her death, and that mystery still remains. And Neptune is connected to mysteries and things that, you know, secrets. So there's a mystery and a secret about this woman, and it was part of her life and part of her legacy as well. Now, also part of this yod is the Saturn-Uranus conjunction and the connection to the MC, which is career, public achievements as well. But the Saturn-Uranus part is about bringing ideas, Uranus, bringing innovation, Uranus, bringing, sticking it to the man, liberation, freedom, into some sort of structured reality, which is Saturn, structured earthly dimension, structured, it can be a routine, it can be something like, some sort of business, or not business so much, sorry, maturity, some sort of, I'm struggling to find the words, I'm sorry, but having some sort of structure in your life is Saturn. And in this case, her ideas, her innovations, her, very Uranian style of, rebelliousness almost, is given structure in this yod, connected to career, connected to that Neptunian element. So there was a rebelliousness towards, say, authority figures, like her father figure was somebody that was not sort of held in high esteem in her life. He was an alcoholic and divorced her mother, and she stayed with her mother and so forth. There's this real, Saturn-Uranus piece playing out, where there's this rebelliousness towards authority figures. This, I can show you that a woman can be just as good as a man. Let me prove it to you. And this is all connecting to that Neptune, which is part of that beautiful little stellium in the second house about feminine empowerment and transformation, the Pluto piece. So I hope I haven't lost you there. There is no yod drawn on this chart from astro.com, but there is one that exists there between the MC, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. But I do hope that this has given some insight to who she was. Now, she, as I said, has been dead for a very long time. There is still mystery around her death and what happened to her. A lot of intrigue, and that's likely to remain. I mean, Neptune has put a veil over that for us. There's a mask over the truth with that Neptune part of this yod. But she did leave a glorious legacy of written books and heroic, courageous deeds. And again, Jupiter and Mars together in the 5th house, she was heroic to like a huge degree. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, and it's expanding that Mars, which is that heroism, to do with the things she was passionate about, the things that she loved, which in this case was flying. And so in tribute to Amelia, this beautiful Leonian flamboyant soul, I offer up this reading, and I hope it's been insightful for many other people. So thanks for joining me for this sojourn around Amelia Earhart's chart. I hope this has been beneficial to you, and maybe you've seen some things that are present in your own chart, and it's given some light and some information to your own character and your own journey and your own experience. So I do hope it's been a blessing to you. And if you would like a reading with me, please contact me via the link in the comments below. I would love to either do a solar return reading for you or a full length reading. They're the two services I offer. Or if you would prefer me to answer a single question, then just choose either of those readings. You'll pay for the length of time. One's longer than the other, and it's all spelled out there on the web page. But yes, I can certainly do a one question reading for you, and you just pick which length of time you'd like me to speak for. So thanks very much, and God bless. Happy landings to you, Amelia Earhart.